Hello, I'm David Hunt. My guest today is a Scottish boy. Came to Australia. The subtitles will come up along the screen as a show. No, I'm joking. He arrived in Australia quite a few years ago, and we'll find out why they kicked him out of Scotland, but that's another story. Freelance journo. Ooh, freelance. How tough is that? Interesting. Very involved in the community as well. But his love of arts, he's getting a lot of major roles these days in the arts, but film is his passion. In his words, and I agree, he actually snorts a lot. So that's one of his great, and he did it on cue. I can't believe it. Stephen A. Russell. I'll say that again. Stephen A. Russell.
It's broken now. It's going to happen constantly, David. There'll be a snort avalanche.
So let's talk. Whereabouts in Scotland are you from?
So I'm originally from Glasgow.
Okay.
44 years ago, born in Scotland. I'm not actually sure if it's the largest city now. It's probably the largest city, but it's a kind of city that, in its bones, loves the arts. It's long had an incredible music scene, David. It's got some of the best theatres in Britain.
Well, even back then when it was...
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. I thought it was only in recent years.
No, so actually the theatre particularly is a long... Theatre and music's a long tradition in Glasgow. I mean, very recently I was interviewing Richard E. Grant, and he said right at the start of his career, he was desperate to get a gig with the Citizens Theatre in Glasgow.
Okay.
And they knocked him back.
Wow.
And they knocked back Daniel Day-Lewis, would you believe?
Whoa.
So there you go.
Because I always thought that it was Edinburgh. Because we see it, yearly with the festival.
I mean, it's one of those things, David. It's a bit like the Melbourne-Sydney thing. Obviously, Edinburgh has astounding beauty with, the castle on a rock in the middle of the city, and just like Sydney with the Opera House and the harbour.
Yeah.
But just with Melbourne, you could argue there's more going on under the surface of the
well,
other
there
city.
There is, isn't there? So here we go, Glasgow, and we always think of it being rough and tumble, back, especially back then, because 17 years you've been here?
17 years.
Yeah, 17 years. What was it like as a gay lad in a city like that, and when did you come out?
It's funny you say that, David, obviously, and you'd be aware of this. But even at 44, the world was so different back in my day. So, we didn't have queer characters on television or film very often.
The internet, so you couldn't really look
You'd have to furtively find books, and often they were, traumatic or depressing stories. They weren't exactly, happy love stories, and there was no such thing as kind of young adult. It didn't happen in that sense. So yeah, it was kind of like Glasgow wasn't a rough city. I've always said Glasgow's the sort of city where if you're not a great person, you might not do so well there. But it's actually a very welcoming and friendly city. But yeah, there is a small but perfectly formed queer scene in Glasgow.
Okay.
But I was my family had moved down to the coast, to a little town, for quite a big bit of my life.
Yeah.
So, going to university in Glasgow was partly because, I maintained my connection to the city and loved it. But it was also very much an excuse for me to go there and come out and do all of that.
And because your family wasn't there as well?
They were down living in a coastal town.
What was the town?
Irvine at that point. We lived in Coinning and then Irvine.
Irvine, okay. It doesn't sound very
no.
Scottish. Irvine.
Yeah, it's a Scottish name.
Is it? Oh, okay.
But it was far enough away. It was 40 minutes in the train, about an hour drive. But it felt like a world away.
Yeah. And so was it uni that brought you out? You hadn't done it at school?
No, hadn't come out. And you've got to remember at this point, Margaret Thatcher, when I was a kid, was Prime Minister saying, with Section 24 saying gay people were an abomination, that we, literally bringing in law so you couldn't even mention it in school.
Whoa.
And I went to a Catholic school. So, you know,
Whoa.
all we got taught is sex is between a man and a woman when they're married and only for children, was pretty much what I was taught. So it was a big thing. And so I was in the halls of residence and I thought, I'll get to uni, I'll come out, that'll be the start of everything. And then of course, as soon as you get there, you're 17 years old, you're not quite confident yet. You've been through school where you kind of would get battered if you said anything like that. And so it didn't happen immediately. I was really freaked out. But I remember, I will never forget, David, there used to be, for some strange reason, I ended up in a halls of residence that was right on the kind of leafy edges of the city. In a place called Wolfson Hall, and there were literally rabbits bouncing around outside.
Aww, gorgeous.
And it was near the vet school, so it was predominantly vet students.
Okay.
And for some reason, a lot of lawyers. But so there was me doing, English literature, and I was kind of like, I don't even know why I'm here. But they had a little free bus that would go into the city, and so bearing in mind, I hadn't plucked up the courage to tell anyone yet. But one night I got this little free bus into the city centre.
Yeah.
And at that stage, one of the big gay bars called Sadie Frost was literally kind of in a basement underneath one of the central stations, Queen Street. And I remember, plucking up the courage to cross the threshold, and I was literally shaking with terror.
Or excitement as well?
Excitement and terror, like both. And second guessing myself, I probably, walked up to the door and back a few times.
So sweet.
But as soon as I got in there, oh my goodness, there used to be Karen Dunbar. She's done a lot of comedy shows in Scotland, like one people might know as Still Game. But in those days, she was very much a DJ. And she was kind of like an MC, she wasn't just playing tunes, she was having banter with the crowd. She did funny phone games where, she'd phone up and play tricks on people. And so as soon as I walked in there, I just thought she was amazing. And funnily enough, I was just home in September and went to a night that she was hosting, and I went up and told her how much it had meant to me.
Oh, wow.
To suddenly realise that there was this community. And I guess one of the things I loved about Glasgow, David, is it's a city of 1 million people. So it's a big, small town, right?
Yep.
And there were 2 gay clubs, one very lush, one a bit more skeevy, but they were both great, and you always did both in one night. And there was a little satellite of bars around them, but it was small but perfectly formed.
Yeah.
So there was no sort of separation of the community. So from my very earliest days, we were all in it together, gay people, lesbians, trans people, all ages. That was one of the things I loved about it.
And was that woman you were talking about, was she part of the family as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, okay.
Proud lesbian.
Right, okay.
And always has been, has a successful TV career. She's probably one of the people that kind of bucked the trend.
Right.
Was an early,
Fantastic.
Embraced person.
Yeah, and did you have a boyfriend?
I had a couple, but I have to say, David, I was probably more of a wild oats kind of boy. And
So things haven't changed much.
Not really, to be honest. I call myself a wild horse, Don't like to pin myself down.
So what were you studying at uni?
So this is a funny story as well, David. As you well know, my passion is film. So I intended to go to Glasgow University to study film and television alongside English literature. But to my great shame, I didn't get into the course. So maybe there's a bit of belligerence about my whole career to prove them wrong. I don't know. But so I ended up studying English literature.
Well, that would have been handy though, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
For a journalist,
I hate this whole conversation that's come about in recent years, kind of trying to devalue the arts and arts degrees as if there weren't, a vast array of transferable skills that comes from critical thinking, from
I think now that it's really turned a corner, the arts degree was a bit, like sort of, but now, well, I know one of my best friend's daughter is going into uni next year, and she's doing arts, but she's going to be a lawyer.
Well, there you go. Oh, I think it's changing again, but certainly under the previous, federal government, they jacked up the fees, and I think they were saying, unless you're going to do a practical career, you're going to have to pay for the privilege. Whereas I think, I'm really lucky that I came of age in Scotland, where one of the first acts of the devolved Scottish Parliament was to make university education free to all Scottish citizens. So again, Scotland's always been, it's been a working class country, but one that absolutely values arts and literature and poetry.
And did you get through straight away? Or did you fluff around like so many uni students do and change courses?
No, so I stuck with English literature. I also did some weird side degrees, like I did courses
rabbit hunting,
medieval history, and moral philosophy.
Whoa! And was it a medieval history from Scottish?
No, weirdly it was still kind of very much popes and English kings for some reason. I don't know.
So a trivia night, if there was like questions about English kings, do you know them, or have you forgotten all
maybe
of it?
A little bit, probably mostly through Shakespeare, I think.
Right. Okay.
But no, I think more the literature. And and I always loved film. So one of the great things, David, was I actually intended to be an actor, believe it or not. I don't know if this will surprise you.
I can believe you.
So I'd gone to the drama club at Glasgow University with that intention, thinking I'd go on to drama school afterwards. And there's a couple of funny stories on that. But in all honesty, I think I did one class or one meeting, and I found them all insufferable. I thought, I don't know if I can do this. So I literally came out of that group, and someone was touting on the street for the Glasgow University Guardian, which was the uni paper. And I thought, well, maybe I'll give that a go. And so that was actually this kind of accidental beginning of my pathway towards journalism.
Okay.
Which my mum also thought, you shouldn't go into acting, that's a totally unstable career. Little did we know what the internet was going to do to journalism as well. So, it's a very different world.
So here you are, you end up being a journalist in Scotland?
Yeah, it started really soon. So while I was still at uni and going to the uni paper, I actually started writing for a listings magazine that was very similar to kind of the idea of Time Out, I suppose.
Okay,
right from the start. So
great.
I started, working as a professional journalist while I was still,
studying
at uni, studying.
Yeah. Okay. Why Australia? What was the reason to move? I was joking that you were kicked out, but I know it's true. So what's the story you're going to make up on why you ended up in Australia?
Okay, so long story short, after Glasgow University deciding to settle on journalism, I actually went down to London.
Whoa.
Which is something, it's kind of, you know how the way like people from all over Australia sort of end up in Melbourne or Sydney quite often? It's a very similar thing in Britain.
Course,
people end up doing their stint in London.
But London, of all
I know.
All places, so the competition is fierce.
Exactly. And this was just at the point where journalism was sort of safe and secure career. And then things were changing rapidly, the internet, giving things away free on the internet. Who knew that would sort of cripple the journalism for a long time? They're still wrestling with how to make that work, I suppose. But look, I went there, I did a year's postgrad in journalism. I loved it. I lived in London for 3 years, still adore that city, but it's really tough.
And what about the gay scene? Like in London, did you get caught up in it?
Absolutely.
And it would have been so exciting.
So exciting because, as you well know, there's people from all over the world in London. What I loved about it was that all these different, nationalities, there was clubs that, like there were queer clubs in London that catered for Bollywood dancing. It was so finely grained.
Well, yeah, but yeah,
what you
I
could
get
go
that.
and-
So many Indians living in London.
It's wonderful. So I threw myself into that. It was probably pretty wild years. It was tough to get a job.
Yeah.
But so I ended up moving back to Glasgow.
Okay.
Funnily enough, for The Big Issue, I got a great job with them, and it was such a small team. So I'd be writing about film and television and, interviewing theatre stars, but also doing hard news and social affairs. So it was a really great kind of training ground.
Yep.
And then after about 3 years, I met a boy
Oh.
who was a Scottish boy actually,
Right.
but who had moved here as a young man, got married, later realised that wasn't for him. But his mum unfortunately had passed away and he was back in Scotland for about 6 months. We had what was meant to be a bit of a holiday spling. But then around about Christmas we decided, why don't we give it a go? And so I ended up actually moving to Australia. I wanted an adventure. I wanted, to...
Big thing though.
Yeah, but it was partly for a boy who dumped me on day 4. So that wasn't to be.
Whoa, was that devastating for you?
It was pretty devastating, but I feel like, David, I was so determined not to go back home with my tail between my legs.
Yeah.
That I'm here 17 years on through sheer bloody belligerence.
Yeah.
Like, I will make a life for myself.
And it was Melbourne. You moved into Melbourne.
So I've been here the whole time, and I'm actually, when I moved out of there, I ended up, subletting a room in the apartment where I still live on my own 17 years later.
Wow. And what about getting a job, because you're a freelance journalist, which, yikes. But then again, that's coming back around because...
Well, most are now.
Yeah, because the papers are, especially the one that you do a lot of work with, it's mostly all freelance journalists.
Well, absolutely. It's now the kind of common model, strangely enough. It's, again, incredible. I talked about...
You've been lucky in that respect, haven't you?
Really?
Because you also write for SBS, for the...
Heaps.
And the trade union.
Yeah, but look, it wasn't easy at first. When I first moved here...
Oh, of course it wasn't.
You kind of have to prove yourself again. Nobody cares about your experience on another continent, right? They're like, okay, but who do you know here? Who are your contacts? So for a long time I worked in bars, cafes, restaurants, for a good long while. I actually ended up getting back into journalism with the long departed Fairfax Community Network magazines as a property journalist, would you believe it?
Right.
So I was mostly writing about fancy houses I could never afford. But that eventually, long story short again, that part of the company folded. And so I didn't exactly choose to be a freelance journalist. About 10 years ago now, I think, maybe more, 10 or 12. It kind of accidentally happened. But one of the weird vagaries of how it went down was that that little bit of the company had been sold to another company. And when they closed, what actually happened was it was sort of a weird promotion, because all of a sudden, people I'd known who worked at The Edge were like, oh yeah, you can write for us for the arts pages. So I went from working from the little free magazines to suddenly having my name in, Melbourne's prestigious, broadsheet newspaper.
Yeah.
And that really just opened everything.
Wow.
From there.
Film is your passion.
Absolutely.
Why?
That's a really good question. I think in a nutshell, film to me, and particularly when we moved to a small town in Scotland on the coast where nothing ever happened, it was very much a window on the world. You could live the life of people in far-flung countries that you had no hope of ever meeting, and I think that for me that's what it was. I'm a great book lover as well. Yeah. But something about the visuals of film.
Yeah. And like the scenery or the beautiful decorated houses.
And the music,
And the music plays a huge part, yes.
Absolutely. It just folds so many different parts of storytelling into it. And I mean, I'm obsessed. When the Melbourne International Film Festival comes around, David, I see a ridiculous amount every day. It's a sheer joy for me to write about film and to interview actors, directors, screenplay writers, you know, I feel that one of the joys of my job is that it's never the same. I'm sitting down like you are today, you know, just hearing someone's story is an endlessly interesting thing to do for a living.
I totally agree. I love hearing people's stories. But now you're writing, you know, like not just about film, so which you don't. In when one of the daily papers, you don't write about film. You write about the arts. You know, like you're getting some of the big stories now.
Well, I think that's one of the things, David, that I feel. I mean, but is it luck? I don't know. But one of the joys is that I've always loved. You know, I do love theatre. I love music. I love books. And so I've always been interested in many things, and I think that's one of the things that helps as a freelancer. Is if you have knowledge of and a passion in many different, you know, kind of art forms, then obviously that's going to give you more opportunities to be hired.
Yep, absolutely. I'm so thrilled with how busy we are, but you are one of the most connected people in the LGBTIQ community, more so the gay side of it. You know bloody everyone. You know, like everyone, you know, like you mentioned, oh yeah, they're friends of mine, or there's a photo of you with them. You know, like you really
I feel like you're pretty
about. Connected
too, David, you know? You're a bit of an elder statesman in the community.
But yours is more the social side of it, isn't it?
I think that might be a hangover of moving here when I was in my 20s and just going out absolutely everywhere and wanting to meet new people. And
have you been in relationships here in Australia? Apart from the one when you arrived in 4 days?
A small handful, none of which has particularly lasted a long time.
What about now?
No, honestly, David, I feel like I got old and cranky and set in my ways very young. I just like my peace and quiet at home. And, you know, part of this life, right, the arts life and the journalism life, and is, you know, a lot of going out at nights to see films or theatre, to go to events. And so people often see the gregarious me and think that that's, you know, 24/7. But honestly, when I get home, quite often I'll sit in silence reading a book, or I'll watch one television show or film and then turn it off. You know, I like my space.
Yeah.
I've always been that way.
And you've got, you live with somebody as well, your cat.
I do.
What's your cat's name?
My little girl, Chili. She's a beautiful tuxedo moggy who was found under a house.
Aww.
I think she had a bad life beforehand.
Yeah.
And
how long have you had her?
It's going on 12 years now.
Whoa, so she's getting on.
Yeah, she is. Yeah. She's a little wobbly cat. She's only got 3 legs because she's a cancer survivor, David.
Right, okay.
So she's a very dear girl, but she loves her daddy. But if you come round to my house, you probably won't see her. She'll vanish under the bed and come back out. It's hilarious. Like literally, I can have a dinner party, and the second the last guest leaves, she'll pop out, like within seconds. Whoa. I'll often take a photo of her to tell them, you know, send to them going, I do actually have a cat.
And there's the bowl down there. So, you know, like with your journalism and your love of films, you're doing a lot of Q&As now for the film companies and the cinemas. And all. Are you enjoying doing that?
I mean, that's one of the things I love, David. You know, for so many years, I was sort of exclusively a writer, and it can be a kind of solitary role. You know, you're on the phone to people. Sometimes you're going out to interview people, less so now since everything that's happened in the last few years. But you know, and then coming on the radio with you is fantastic. But there's something about when I do Q&As for the Melbourne International Film Festival or Cinema Nova or the Classic, or, you know, as you said, for directly asked by the film distributors. You know, you get up in front of a room and it's not just what we're doing now, interviewing. You're also, it's a bit of a showman role. You've got to get the audience engaged, you know, encourage them to ask questions, you know, to bounce between them and the filmmaker. Yeah. And maybe that goes back to that, you know, early ambition to be an actor. You know, it's sort of like being up on the stage, isn't it?
Yeah. It's another way around it.
Yeah.
Hey, when you mentioned about the audience engaged to ask questions. how dumb are some of the questions the audience, and it's people just, it's their moment, it's their, as Andy Warhol has said, their 15 minutes of fame, standing up there, putting their hand up, asking, and you'd shake your head and go, what's this question going to be?
Sometimes they're a bit curly, and sometimes, as Tony Jones on Q&A used to often say, it's like, I'll take that as a comment. But you have to remember exactly what you've just said. First of all, it's really nerve-wracking, so you've got to give people a bit of credit for having the gut. You're absolutely right. Sometimes they seem, you sort of roll your eyes, but filmmakers love it. There's again, filmmaking can be a very, I don't think people realise how long it takes.
Years,
to get film up, right? Yeah. It's a very, very long process. The finance
alone, before you even...
It's Herculean hurdles to pass, right? To get a film to that stage where you're finally showing it in a cinema in front of people. So filmmakers are so excited usually when it gets to that stage. They just love talking to audiences about this labour of love of theirs.
And rightly so. Although sometimes you see them and they're a little bit cool and go,
maybe that's how many films they've made.
But it also could be nerves, and it comes across as being a bit arrogant. So many films these days, and you slag films when you
occasionally.
When you do. And I love it when you do, and then I often will throw it back at you, a couple of weeks' time when it gets a 4-star review and you're giving it 2 stars.
Well, that's the joy of film. I mean, and anything, music, it's subjective.
Yep.
I've never seen the critics' role as the be-all and end-all. It's just a conversation starter, and I love engaging with. And very much the Margaret and David, you're like, what? How, David? There's nothing more joyous to me than rigorously debating whether a film is good or not.
More and more these days, and it's on social media, you see it where people say, why did they make that? It's the biggest load of crap I've ever seen, and it's come up a couple of times. I'm not going to mention the series that are on that's on the streaming and all that now, but in the last few months it's been, I suppose, because of COVID, and then all of a sudden there was this flurry, and they were going up into Queensland where they weren't in lockdown, where other places in the world were, and so a lot of trash got released, didn't it?
One man's trash is another man's treasure, isn't it? But look, I think one of the things is we have so much more content now. Back in our day, we had 2-3 television channels, and maybe cinemas we went to more, but now we have proliferation of streaming services that are hungry for content.
Yeah.
So sometimes that's going to not always be the best, but also with more outlets is more opportunity, which means we're starting to hear more voices that didn't always get, a say. And things like GoFundMe, these kind of things like social media have allowed filmmakers to cut out the establishment funding bodies and go direct to people who want to hear their stories. And so we're seeing, a much more diversity on our screens. And I love that, David. I'm all for it. And
there's gay rom-coms now coming out, which is wonderful to see. Hey, just quickly to finish off, you mentioned, you're talking about streaming and the fact that people are streaming so much that it's going straight to streaming and not the cinemas. Can you see the death of cinemas?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think one thing we've got to remember is we've heard the death of cinema proclaimed so many times. When talkies were going to kill them. VHS were going to kill them. DVD was going to kill them. And if anything, I think it's a new hybrid model into the future. What we're seeing is, Netflix buying prestige films and then putting them in cinemas for a week or two before it goes on the streaming. And I think that's ultimately what we're going to see. Because it is amazing to sit on your sofa and be able to, as I say, go open these windows to another world. But nothing will ever beat the thrill of actually being in a cinema with a whole room full of strangers.
But then there are people on their phones.
That's annoying.
Or talking to each other. That's why I don't go anymore. The grumpy old man. Yeah.
You have both. And I think that's what it's going to be. It's not going to be one or the other. It's going to be both. And it allows, I mean, one of the great things about streaming is, you know, the access it allows for people with disabilities that can't get to a cinema so easily.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
They're both wonderful,
Yeah.
and I love that they can live together.
Absolutely. Stephen A. Russell, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Absolute joy, David. Thank you.
I'm David Hunt. That's it for today. I'll be back again soon. See ya.